Hello there. This is CRP. I wanted to talk to you about political violence, and this is just going to be the one-shot kind of video. See if this thing works. Well, I come from Chile. My family's from Chile. We've been in Chile since the 16th century, as a matter of fact. Yeah. And we know a thing or two about political violence. Anybody from Latin America knows a thing or two about political violence. You see, political violence is more often than not the tool of political actors, that is, politicians. See, the politician, the way it works is, you see, one hand washes the other. The politician helps the rioters, and the rioters help the politician. You see, you have to understand that there are two kinds of rioters, of political violence, okay? The one is spontaneous. The one is just people got fed up. Something happened, whatsoever. It could have been major or it could have been trivial. And all of a sudden, it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and just everybody just starts rioting. And, like Rodney King. That's a classic example. The Rodney King riots in '92 in the US. I remember them very well. I was living in Washington at the time, and I saw them on TV, and holy cow. But that was spontaneous. It wasn't that anybody was directing that. It was just people just got fed up. The video was just outrageous, and everybody just, kaflooey. The whole thing went up in flames, okay? That's what happened. Sorry, my seat keeps sliding down. I got to replace it. But anyway, that's an example of spontaneous political violence. But what we saw in the United States over the summer was not spontaneous. Oh no, that was pre-planned, okay? We saw it. We saw it while the riots were happening. We'd see, pallets of bricks being arrayed in strategic points throughout the various cities where there was rioting going on. And more to the point, we saw a lot of politicians downplaying the violence, or else saying that it was justified somehow. Egregious acts of violence, of vandalism, of burning people's businesses, destroying people's businesses. And the politicians would say that it was justified. And the propagandists for these politicians, i.e. the media, they would excuse it away. You saw that famous video of that guy, that bald-headed reporter with the glasses, and behind him, a Wendy's is on fire, flaming away in the night. And he's like, oh, it's just peaceful protests going on, nothing much to see here. What the hell, man? Come on. Come on. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Propaganda. And see, notice the relationship between the politician who gets an advantage from the rioters and the rioters. You see, the politician, what does he do? He makes sure that the rioters, who are on his political side, of course, they don't get arrested. And if they do get arrested, they don't get charged. See? So the rioters, they skate away scot-free. And what do the rioters give the politician? Very obvious. The rioters intimidate the politician's political opponents. And that's the point of political violence. See? The point of political violence is not to destroy stuff. That just happens as, part of the process. The point of the process, rather, is to intimidate and silence political dissent. That's the point of it. It's not supposed to be like you're getting something tangible from the rioting. No, you're supposed to shut up and frighten away anybody who might oppose you. That's the essence, the point, the reason for political violence. Now, of course, you are a politician. You're a politician, and you have your agents provocateurs, your rioters, your whomever, who are on, a phone call away to go to some city and riot, right? And perhaps you don't have a direct relationship. Of course, if you're a smart politician, you're not going to have a direct relationship. You're going to have an aide who knows a guy who organizes these people. That's how it usually works, okay? no politician, no name brand politician is going to be dumb enough to have a direct relationship with an organizer of these rioters. Of course not. That's, come on. This is 101 here of rioting, of political machinations. You never have a direct relationship with the guy who does the dirty work. The dirty work guy, you have an aide who knows a guy who's in contact with the guy who'll do the dirty work. That's how it works. But anyway, see, the political actor who has these people committing acts of violence on his behalf or on his cause's behalf, right? On his side's behalf. Well, he has those rioters, those thugs, those agents provocateurs, right? And what happens if the other side commits some act of political violence? Well, then the answer is obvious. What you have to do is you have to fall on them like a ton of bricks. You have to make sure that the police attack them, make sure that your propaganda arms vilify them and call them like the worst thing ever, even if the damage they commit is insignificant compared to the damage that your own side has committed. See? I mean, your side might have just set aflame a dozen cities, as happened over the summer. But if your opposing side, even just spits on the sidewalk, you gotta throw a hissy fit and say that it's an insurrection, it's the worst thing that's ever happened, oh my God! The republic is crumbling, democracy is falling apart, ah! That's what you have to do. You have to throw a total hissy fit for the benefit of the cameras, see? So that you completely discredit the violence on the other side, see? Because the more discredited their violence is, the more they are discredited. And the more your violence is allowed to slide, the more power you have. You see? See how it works? Huh? Because see, the political actors, the politicians, the pundits, everybody in the political milieu, they'll realize that, see, your side can inflict violence, but the other side cannot. They can't get away with it, at least. See? And that means that you have the power. You saw, like a couple of years ago, when was it? I think it was 18 or 19, when Tucker Carlson's family was harassed by a bunch of Antifa. I mean, they were just screamed at. And I understand that Mrs. Tucker Carlson, I don't know her name, it doesn't really matter for purposes of this video. She wound up like hiding in the closet with her kids. I mean, if I were Tucker Carlson, I'd be horrified, yeah? I'd be furious, yeah? But what was the point of that? Was it to scare off Tucker Carlson? No, because Tucker Carlson, he realizes that he couldn't back off because of this incident. It would make him look weak and he'd lose all credibility. Even if most people would realize that, yeah, sure, in the face of that kind of potential violence towards my own family, I too would maybe shut up. Yeah, but he realized that his credibility, his entire career, and everything that he is stood for would be just thrown out the window. So he had to push on. Hire security for his family if need be. Probably did. Probably very expensive security, right? But just keep on pushing on. But see, the point wasn't really to intimidate Tucker Carlson with that political violence. The point was to intimidate anyone who might agree with Tucker Carlson, who might be in a position of relevance. To intimidate, say, other newscasters, to intimidate other newspaper columnists or newspaper editors, to intimidate other people who might say, Tucker Carlson seems perfectly reasonable to me and this is outrageous, Yeah, that was the point of it. The point of it was to isolate Tucker Carlson, because that's how political violence works. And like I say, I know this from experience in Chile and in Latin American politics. See, this is how political violence has always operated. It's to intimidate people who might become your allies. See, you suffer the political violence or the threat of violence against your own family, right? And you're horrified and freaked out by it. But see, what happens is that all the other people who might have joined you, they become afraid. And they become afraid and they step back. They step away from you. And they leave you isolated and fighting on your own. That's what happens. That's the whole point of political violence. And there was this Missouri Senator Hawley. I don't really know him. I don't care about him one way or the other. But his family was also harassed, viciously harassed by Antifa with the real threat of potential violence against them. Yeah, he was away back in his home state while his wife and kids and newborn child were in their home in Washington. What do you think is the point of that? To intimidate Hawley, sure, but to intimidate anybody else who might think of joining him. That's how it works. And then you have the thing that happened on the 6th of January, right? What was that? That was spontaneous. I don't know. I do know that from accounts that I've read, on the ground accounts of people who were there, that people were just generally pissed off. They were generally pissed off, and they felt that the election was stolen, and they wanted to protest that. The fact that they believe it was stolen. Whether you agree with them or not, that's irrelevant. They had a legitimate grievance. I mean, it's legitimate by their sheer numbers. There were so many thousands of people there, tens of thousands perhaps, hundreds of thousands, I don't know. Again, that's not the point. There were enough people who drove from all across the country to be there and to protest that their grievance was legitimate. Now, did it turn into a riot? Not really. I mean, I looked at pictures after the fact and everything looked pretty clean. No business had been burned to the ground, right? And the whole Capitol building thing, that looked awfully weird to me. I mean, government buildings are places of high security, right? A joint section of Congress and just a bunch of lowlifes were just allowed to waltz in without any kind of security check, no metal detectors. That just seems bizarre. I'll leave it at that. But my point, see, those people who were there on January 6th, they had legitimate grievances. And notwithstanding, the rowdies who basically took a bunch of selfies inside the Capitol building and really didn't do much except maybe steal a podium, which is maybe something I would have done, I guess. I don't know. But the point, they didn't set the Capitol building on fire now, did they? No, they did not. And did they set Washington on fire? Like Washington was set on fire over the summer, which it was? Did those people on January 6th do that? No, they did not. They're fairly polite and fairly tidy. But they're being disqualified. Their legitimate, spontaneous eruption of anger, which was fairly nonviolent, considering, well, they're being vilified as insurrectionists. They're being called Nazis, worse, anti-democratic. I mean, everybody's just throwing a hissy fit. Well, it's part of the game plan, you see? It's part of the game plan. And this has been going on in Latin America for centuries. Yeah, it's nothing new. I mean, you in the United States or Western Europe, you might not be used to this kind of thing. But me, and in Latin America, we know this. We know this game book, right? And in the past, in Latin America, it was played by both sides, by the right and the left at different times, right? In the United States right now, it's being played by the left, but it's an old movie. We've seen it before. And we know how it ends. You in the United States might not realize this, but we in Latin America, we know how this movie ends. And you know what it ends in? It ends in the side willing to use the violence, controlling the government, and becoming tyrannical against the people. That's how it ends. That's how it's always ended. In Latin America, irrespective of if it was on the right or the left, it always ends the same. Always. The people who are able to inflict violence, use it to intimidate their opponents, inflict political violence and get away with it, they usually win, and they usually start inflicting this political violence on not just their opponent, but ultimately on the entire people. Why? Because they need the violence to stay in power. And staying in power becomes an end in itself. And therefore, the use of violence becomes an end in itself. They need to keep on using the violence more and more repression, more and more abuse in order to stay in power And like I said, the story, it's not new, not in Latin America. And like I said, it's on the right and the left. Because there's always like one side that's more ruthless. And the other side, stupidly, always falls for this this idiocy that, oh, you know, we're not like that. We're above that. Yeah. The more ruthless side is the side that always wins. And, well, it's going to happen in the United States. It's happening in the United States. And if you don't believe me, fine. You don't have to believe me. Yeah? You do not have to believe me. All you have to do is wait.